1 hour and 15 minutes. So we will do 15 minutes of brainstorm or free sharing right now. That is this small ball. It's from Guatemala. It's cleaned. I put on my dry machine, so it's not full of germs. It's very clean. You can get it. And this was made, I had this for the past maybe 15, 16 years, and it travels with me to do this with groups. And it was made by a group of women, indigenous women in one community who does this to sell and to survive. So I will throw the ball to someone so you catch it. And the point now is to share whatever you want. This exercise we did, it was an exercise because the conversation today and tomorrow is how do we express good news, or how do we live up good news in the world in a way that leaves our mark, in a way that is distinctive to us, to our spirituality, to our way of living the gospel and living our faith. So then, whatever you want to share, so the content of your conversation, or the experience, or how do you feel, or some good news you wanted to share. But this is about our exercise, not only the content, but also what we did. So how did you feel about that, and how do you take it? How it reached you? Okay. And if you get the ball and you don't want to share, that is fine. You just pass the ball to another person. Okay? Is that fine? Can I go with someone I know? So Thomas, please.
I won't throw this. I appreciated this exercise to be able to sit and talk in an authentic way. And I love how conversations go the places they need to go. And our group, my group, we started to talk about names and what our names meant and where they had come from. And so suddenly it moved into culture and it moved into history, and I really appreciated learning, and through that conversation finding out that there are actually a lot more similarities than I had initially thought there would be.
Invite someone.
It's a very emotional experience, and it felt a safe space. I felt afterwards that 2 inches had been lifted from my shoulders and gone up 2 inches. It's a good feeling, supportive feeling. Thank you to the other two in my group from my heart.
Was it meant for you or me?
Microphone came here. It was great sharing, and just took a few minutes, I think, just for us to gradually ease into it. And it seemed like after a first round, perhaps we've done that, but then we just sort of moved into it again, and then touched on things like, for example, what it is like for all of us to be living in places different from children or parents. And that wasn't perhaps at the top of our minds and our feelings as we started it, but as we moved into it, it emerged as part of the reality of our lives today.
Oh. Okay.
I found that kind of an amazing experience. It was very, very special. We also eventually moved into our children and how it was for us being parents, which was very cool because it was very shared, something that was so similar for all of us. For me, one of the things that I shared was how when I first got into chapter, it was very exciting meeting people from within the province, and now suddenly I'm meeting people from around the world, and it's kind of giving me goosebumps because it's really exciting.
Wow, it was, yeah, I hope I can speak for our group. It was really incredible experience, sharing and seeing each other at such a deep level, and realizing that while we live different lives, a lot of what we're dealing with is quite similar. You know, our pain and our joys, the challenges ahead of us. And yeah, it was a very, very special time. And thank you, Paulo. Oh, sorry. It was generally where it fell. There you go.
Yes, I think we all found it very moving to do the I see you thing, and you're aware of, well, I was certainly aware of other people at a different level from the way we normally are. We did reflect that people do that with babies. Obviously, a very young baby can't entirely reciprocate, but we do that with babies. And it's important, obviously, in the child's development. But then for some reason we stopped doing it. With the how are you, our conversation gradually moved into areas that were about that which are, some of which are perhaps a bit difficult to talk about and don't often get talked about. And I'm not sure that we were still consciously doing the exercise, but we were certainly in areas that are not kind of the conversation you normally have casually, which I think, yeah, I think that's really important and a very, very helpful exercise. Awkward throwing and so on. No, it's you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for throwing the ball.
I thought it was a very good exercise, particularly at this stage, because it enabled and encouraged us to think again about the people we were meeting, and to do so at a deeper level, to go from looking at just somebody's name to actually looking at them in the face and the heart. So that was very moving, and having the time has been good. That we weren't able to, we weren't rushed, so we were able to breathe together. So not just look, but to breathe together, and that was very powerful. But in that too, we became aware, I think, in our group of how we haven't enabled so much some people whose language is not first language English, and that's been difficult. And I think we might have excluded unintentionally, really thoughtlessly, on all sorts of things, so that people can really hear and really appreciate what's going on. And as part of the group that tried to help organise this, I have to offer a deep apology that we haven't done more to make it easier for you.
Of the group already, someone has spoken. I think it was an interesting exercise in the sense at the beginning of looking at each other and saying, I'm seeing you. Myself, I struggle with that in the sense of something which is probably how I was brought up, is that you don't look at a person. So that you try to keep on looking about his eyes was a bit of a struggle. But also, it's also reminded me of my own cultural thing about courtesy, that because I suppose having lived in the West for so many years, the difficulty about from my own cultural perspective, you don't always tell people how you feel, because it's more a courtesy to say that everything is all right when things are not all right. So those are the sort of things that come into my mind when I was doing that. When we come to the second part of how I do, we sort of open up a lot of different things, which hopefully very much confidential for each person. But also, as we reflect on that, it sort of reminded me of how much, as our lecture this morning, we're talking about, we come from a very race, education, background, sorts of stuff, and how much our gathering this time are so much conditioned by one particular culture insistence on timing. When for some other cultures, you take a day or more to just reflect on something, and time is not so precious as such. We don't rush into things. So that sort of dichotomy of varied backgrounds come into it, in the sense of not only about timing, but also a lot of other things about, accountability, how we spend money, accountability on accounts, because systems requires you to do that, and then others will say that, well, it's for all common good, not about personal space or what belong to me. course, we move into the area of there's a situation of church with professional standards. About how we, in some ways, because of that, we lost the innocence about things or how we respond to children in need or anybody, because we had to think about, oh, what would professional standards say to us today? So this is the reality that we live in. Struggle with that. Our life today. Remember my own thing.
Okay, so for me, I found that being intentional about seeing the other and letting them know that you see them created a different atmosphere to as opposed to just breaking away in groups and discussing something. I felt that it allowed, firstly, it made people feel safe, and it allowed us to share on a much deeper level. It's a lot of confidentiality. Okay, confidential things came out. But then it's also that sort of commitment to the other without even saying that what has been said there is sacred and it's protected and that's where it stays. Which was deeply profound because all of that commitment was made without words, just by seeing the other person. And that was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you all. So we will be sharing more tomorrow as well. And this is again, this conversation today and tomorrow is part of our question about how to express the good news. So everything we've been doing is a kind of a showcase on how the good news of Jesus or how the gospel can be expressed or should be expressed or shall be expressed as we choose. And then this is the first part of this catechetical text to Luke 24. So we will have another bit now with Budi. So he will share about the work of the Franciscans International, which is extended version of our communities and our fraternities and sororities. And we will hear from other people, so other parts of the world as well. And then before lunch, I will do a sum up of this first part. So in terms of doing bullet points on what we did, it might be easier to note. Okay, thank you, Budi.
Thank you, Paulo. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I was very much impressed by first of the methodology of Paulo in trying to live the theology. It's very refreshing, and indeed theology is not about thinking intellectually, but to live with it. How to live, how to do theology. I'm not theologian. I was a trained teacher, and I'm not a teacher now. So changing from one job to another job. But what I would like to share is how we as Franciscan Internationals, the voice of the Franciscans at the United Nations, should be able in one way or the other live and do the theology within a different context, within a secular, let's put it, secular context. And even within the context sometimes that our own identity is being questioned. Because sometimes when we work at the international level within the United Nations, there is a certain force to put behind our faith on spiritual background, not to be understood as moralizing, evangelizing. So there is the challenge that we are confronted, but it doesn't mean that we are discouraged. That's exactly where we are supposed to do it in a way that we can still bring the voices of the Franciscans and our network at the United Nations, translating the good news to something that can be understood by the international community in a frame of language that is completely different. Because the frame of the language, the frames of the terminology is international human rights law, which is really a different setup. I'll bring the stories of some people in which we are working with or we encounter. I'll try to be geographically balanced and sharing the story. Tomorrow, I will also share what we do with this real life story. So when I was in the Philippines visiting, I'm Indonesian by origin, but we are, as Franciscan International, we work a lot on the situation of human rights in the Philippines. So when I visited the Philippines in 2018, I met a lady called Nene Nanet. It's a nickname. In the Philippines, you have names and then you have nicknames. So her name is Nene Nanet. So Nene Nanet lives in a very poor neighborhood in Caloocan, which is one of the dioceses in Metro Manila. Her son was 21 years old. Her son was about to go to Dubai because he was accepted to work in Dubai. And it was a kind of a ticket to have a better life, because she lived in poverty with a small house with 3 or 4 kids. And then having the oldest son going to Dubai is something like, yes, this is the opportunity that I could go out, that we could go out of poverty, receiving money from Dubai, working in Dubai, better life, better education, etc. The whole thing was really well prepared. Got the passport, got the permit, 2 weeks before the departure, except that he was shot by the security forces of the Philippines. He was accused of using drugs. In 2016, the Filipinos, they elected President Duterte, Rodrigo Duterte, as the president of the Philippines. And Duterte was considered as a very strong man, very strong character, whose promise was to provide better life for the people. And one of his program was to clean out the country from the drug users, drug pushers, and drug traders, whatever they call it. And during 6 years of his term, he ordered the killing of at least 30,000 people. At least. At one point, we stopped counting. And from these 30,000 people, when you see a mother of someone that is real, the story becomes different. So when Nene Nanet came to me and spoke about her story, that the dream, the big dream that the family had crumbled down, and even the son was a drug user. That decision, that policy on war on drugs that was adopted by President Duterte at that time was used not only to kill those who are innocents, those who use drugs because of the poverty, who trade drugs because of the poverty, but it has also been used for those who do not like each other. So in each barangay, we call it barangay, in each neighborhood, the chief of the neighborhood is asked by the police to have the drug list. The people that the president said, or the authority said, to be rehabilitated. But in fact, this is a killing list. And you can put the names of the people. they do not like, including this 21 years old. We don't know who put his name, but for Nene Nanet, it was a dream that that became a nightmare. So she came to us, she came to the Franciscans in the Philippines, just to say, I want justice. I want justice on this. We have to do something. It's very unfortunate that really it was one of at least 30,000 stories that we know. And we came to also meet with other people, with other family of victims, including when our Franciscan brothers and sisters, they have to almost every day go from one place to another place to bury people. Even the burial was the wake was a business, because there were so many people who were killed, tens of thousands of them. The police with the funeral house organized also a business, and they set certain price so that the victims will go to the parish church, to the parish priest, to the Franciscans, to ask money so that they can buy the coffin, because otherwise it's too expensive to buy a coffin. And sometimes you have to keep the dead body in your house for some days because until you can collect money. So that stories was really horrifying for us. But we, as the voice of the Franciscan, is asked to do something on that phenomena of war on drugs. That's one story. Another story which is completely different. His name is Ramon. He is Spaniard, and he worked in fact in a center at the southern part of Mexico called La Setentados, the 72. This is a center that is not too far between the border of Guatemala and Mexico. Some of you maybe may have heard about the caravan. So you heard about the caravan, people who escaped from Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and they walk from those countries toward the north with the destination to go to the United States. And this caravan got bigger and bigger on the way. And they walk for hundreds of kilometers. They escaped from organized crime. They escaped from poverty. They escaped from something that is also new, is the unpredicted weather, the climate events. Because all of a sudden the crops are no longer there. All of a sudden they can't get the food from their environment. So these people, because of frustration, they took all the risk to walk from Honduras for days and days to Mexico, crossing the border. And in between, of course, there are so many dangers, either being robbed, being raped, being, beaten. So Ramon, who is a volunteer, he worked with a team of, I don't remember exactly, around 10 to 20 people who will welcome these people from the caravan. So they will be welcome in the center. They are provided with food. They are provided with water. And the most important thing, in fact, they provide security for women and children so that at least for a few weeks, they can sleep without being afraid of either rape, beaten, robbed. So it was a sanctuary at least for some weeks, because the objective is not to stop in Mexico. The objective is to go further. Some of them, mostly men, will wait for the train. I think you've heard that story as well, no? The train that goes from Mexico to the border. They will risk their life by jumping to this cargo train Some succeeded, some do not. Some could go to the United States, some would lose either the legs or the hands because they miscalculate the jumping. Some might go back to their country of origin, some might go errand in Mexico. And those also are the situations that we were informed and we were also asked to do something, because the situation is due to multi-crisis, multi-problem. It's not only one issue, but there are several issues in which we cannot just turn our eyes closed, but we have to respond to it. The next story is from Mozambique. I don't know how many of you have heard about Cabo Delgado. Yeah. Cabo Delgado in the northern part of Mozambique. It's a very nice place without the conflict. It's also a nice place in which you have natural resources. Once you have natural resources, some people say that there's a curse of resources. So Cabo Delgado, like many parts of the world, but I will use the example of Cabo Delgado, is also very rich in natural resources. And there is a conflict that people say it's because of the Muslim fundamentalist group to try to occupy the place for natural resources. But some other people say that the conflict is created so that people can be displaced. So that once the people are displaced, it's easier for the company to come in. Because if you only ask people to move while the people have the entitlement of the place, then it will be very difficult. But if you create security problem, so people will be forced to move, there's no other option than to move. And then the insecurity will be entertained for a longer time, then you can have other forces to come and use the place so that the resources can be exploited. So we are also faced with this request coming from Mozambique in the situation of Cabo Delgado in the northern part of Mozambique, where the conflict took place or the tension is still there, and tens of thousands of people are displaced in many parts of the northern part of the northern province of Mozambique. So those are the real situations in which we are called to do something. And of course, to do something has to be to do something that is meaningful, but at the same time, we cannot provide false hope for the community. Franciscan International is a voice of the Franciscan at the United Nations, but we are not the problem solver, because we have to make it very clear to the victims what we can do, what we can provide is to be their voice, that what happens to them is not forgotten, it's not lost in the so many problems that we have to face. One of the biggest challenges for us at the United Nations is that, especially from the human rights perspective, it's very bad to say that, but everyone competes who is the worst among us. Yeah. My problem is much more important than your problem. Mine is worse. With the limited time, they have to convince that, by the way, it's not competition. Every situation deserves to have discussion. Every situation deserves to be given attention. So for us, it's always very challenging in trying to respond to all this crisis, this reality, in a very meaningful way. And also theologically, as Paulo has said, where's the good news on this situation? It's challenging, right? Where's the good news? Shall we provide false hope to them? No, it's not our role to provide false hope, because in some cases, people think that if they speak or the person is addressed at the United Nations, the problem is solved. No, it's not like that. So it's very challenging, but very enriching also on how to be able to bring the good news in this kind of situations, which is very challenging, in which we know that we are not the only person who is going to address that issue. We know that it takes so much efforts together at all levels so that the concern can be addressed and that there will be a hope in the future so that the situation can be addressed. Let's go back again to what happens to Nenek Nanet. Because Nenek Nanet was really frustrated and she felt that her life ended. Why should I live when my son died? And when he was killed, the technique that they used by the Philippine National Police is that someone is killed and that person will be given with pistol, with guns, as if that person was fighting against the police. Therefore, the person had to be killed. So it's always, and the dead body will be left in front of the house. And then it was a warning for the neighborhood as well. This is what's going to happen to you if you sell drugs or use drugs. And at one point, for about a year and two years more or less, we had collections of pictures, of testimonies, hundreds of them. So Nenek Nanet said, like, I am afraid to speak up, but I need to speak up because I need to bring these atrocities to the international community. So we spoke with her. We tried to also seek for psychological accompaniment for her and her family, not by us, but by other organizations. Some human rights NGOs came to her and to be with her. And then we offered her if she would like to give testimonies at the United Nations. Because our advocacy work at the United Nations will not have strong impact if the victims themselves do not speak. So we invited Nenek Nanet to come to Geneva, and then we organized what we call as a side event. It's a 1.5 hour conference within the United Nations, in which we provide a space for different actors to speak, including the family of victims. Then we also have another lawyer. Then we have another people with the capacity to analyze what are the international obligations of the Philippines with regard to right to life, with regard to human rights. And we discuss it together so that Nenek Nanet can provide the real life experience from her own experience. And of course, I mean, it was really, for me, it was really powerful because even the diplomats, some of them were crying, you know, because we need to touch the heart of this diplomat. Otherwise, they talk about coma, they talk about, you know, we welcome the report, or we noted the report, or we take note of the report. That sort of legal language, if some of you are lawyers, you understand it very well. That sort of detail for the diplomat, they're very important. But we have to ask to Nenek Nanet, what does it mean, that sort of language for her? Because it's about her life. So, of course, it was not easy. Of course, the problem was not immediately solved. But at least when I came back last year with talked to Nenek Nanet, she said, like, I do feel that I try to do my best for the justice of my son. I know that my son is not going to be alive again. I know it very well. But at least his death was not in vain, because I could bring this to the attention of the international community, that his case is noted, is known, is addressed, is spoken. Although from the 30,000 cases that happened in the 6 years of to that day, there are only 2 convictions. 2 out of 30,000. And now we are still working on it. Of course, it's very difficult to say, at least we have 2. because it's from 30,000 cases. But we try to do our best within our capacity, within our network, so that some of the cases are taken seriously. And through the network, also other network, there is now a case in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, in which there is an accusations against President Duterte for the crimes against humanity. The fact that the case is admitted by the International Criminal Court is an achievement by ourselves. This is a form of accountability. We don't know whether the case will take 10 years, maybe 15 years, we don't know yet. But we know that there is a response. We know that the good news is that those cases are not closed. The good news is that Nene Nanet now is one of the human rights defenders representing the family of victims. The good news is that I lost my son, but I will stand up. And I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm very proud that I, who was a poor person in a neighborhood that has been faced with poverty, now I can speak publicly. I can provide the testimonies so that other people can hear. So for her, it was very bitter experience. But for us, in providing this opportunity for her to speak at the international level, provided confidence to her, but also provided confidence for other family of victims to denounce, not to stay silent despite the pressure. So in terms of, again, the story of Las Setentados in Mexico, the work is continuing. It's not very easy. Hundreds of people come every day until now, and the capacity of the center is limited. It's very limited. We cannot accommodate more than, I don't remember exactly the capacity, but not more than 100 or 200% at a time. But we find out that, in fact, when people passing by the border to Mexico, it is also the responsibility of the state of Mexico to provide security to these people. It is their obligation. It is their international human rights obligation to provide security. So we also push the Mexican government to take the responsibility to provide protections for these people. And at the same time, we feel as well that in their country of origin, it is their obligation as well to address the root causes, organized crime. Organized crime is very rampant in Guatemala, in Honduras, in El Salvador. So this is also the responsibility of the states to address these root causes that they have. So we try to link up these causes and try to put pressure to each government that it is their responsibility to provide security so that people will feel that their right to life is guaranteed, their human rights are respected. And at the same time, we also try to help those human rights defenders who work with people on the move, sometimes we call them as people on the move, to document the different human rights violations experienced by these people. Because sometimes when women are raped, they're afraid to speak up. Really, they are very afraid to speak up. When people are being robbed or beaten on the way, they are afraid because they never know that there will be reprisals against them. So we also provided some training for the human rights defenders to be able to speak with the victims so that we can document all those experiences of human rights violations on the way when they move from the Central American toward Mexico and perhaps also toward the United States. And we also provide some spiritual guidance because it's also very important for these people to have their faith as the source of strength to continue. So there is also a joint mass or joint gathering organized between one of the event that we organized is in the border between the United States and Mexico, So there is a river. So we organize mass in the two sides, in the side of Mexico and on the side of the United States. We celebrated together, although it's a border, to let the people know that we are with them. We are with the victims. We are in solidarity. Maybe we cannot help them to cross the border, but at least they know that as much as possible, we are together with them. That they are not abandoned, no? That they are not left alone. And then back to Cabo Delgado. It's very complicated once again because this is also a place in which different multinationals is fighting against each other so that they can get the resources, oil, gas, whatever from that region. So what we do is really trying to set up the international human rights obligations with regard to business and human rights. Currently, at the international level, there is no international framework on the responsibility of business with regard to human rights. It might sound a bit odd, but that's the reality. So when a business is committing human rights, they are not accountable. They are not accountable at the international level. Since 2014, Franciscan International, with so many other organizations, we are working toward the establishment of legally binding instruments on the responsibility of transnational corporations and other businesses with regard to human rights. It's still on the make, it's still on the process, but this is part of our responses on how to respond to those challenges that the people are facing in their respective country. Once again, the story of Cabo Delgado is not only in Cabo Delgado. It happens in Democratic Republic of Congo. It happens in Brazil. We work on the issue of the southern part of Brazil. It happens in my own country, everywhere. The issue of migrations is not only happening in Central America. People from Rohingya, you remember, they are still facing now the difficulties, not only in Bangladesh, but they go to Thailand, they go to Indonesia, they go to Australia, they go to many countries, and they still cannot get the protections. They try to move from one place to another place to get a better place, to get the security, but they're always pushed, they're always denied. It's still happening. And what happens to the killing, we call it extrajudicial killing, that's the UN terminology, because it's killing by the state actors beyond outside the law. So we call it extrajudicial killing. What happens with the people in the Philippines? It is still happening, in fact, with the new president. Since last year, we had a new president called Marcos Jr. Some of you might remember President Marcos from the previous dictatorship. Now it's the son who is the president. And I just mentioned about Duterte, the one that killed 30,000 people. Now the daughter is the vice president. And it's not a joke. And they are overwhelmingly voted by the people. So this is the challenge that we are facing as well. I just came back from the Philippines about a week ago. And I spoke with a research center from the University of the Philippines who said that since the new president, at least there are 400 cases on truck-related killings. This is at least the one that they could find from the public information. The one that are not publicly reported, there are thousands. So you can just imagine that the story of Nene Nanet continues. Cases are still going on. And this is, again, we have to bring the good news to this community. No? Then another story, what is often touching for me, for us, when we try to address, often what they say is that we understand that the solution is not coming from Franciscan International, it's not coming from you as an organizations, but we feel that we are not abandoned. So the feeling of not being abandoned is very, very useful for them, no? That they are not frustrated. They feel that they are listened, they are being heard. So this is very, very important for them. And this is part of our so-called ministry, our advocacy work. It's just to be present and try to do our best in bringing what's happening to them to the international community. And tomorrow I will give you some more examples on what exactly we do in trying to bridge what's happening with the community, what's happening with the victims, with the United Nations, and theologically, where is the good news? That will be for tomorrow after our theologian explanation. Okay, I give it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So any comments or questions to Budi or Sherry before I go?
There was a phrase about a group that had been oppressed, which I couldn't pick up. It was a complicated, it's Spanish. No, not Rohingya. It was anyway, I'll probably pick it up. Yes, there was like a caravan of people. What was the phrase that was used for?
It's about the caravan.
The caravan, yeah.
Can you elaborate about the caravan?
So the caravan is a movement of people. Yeah, we call it caravan. Now I think the UN is very complicated, no? They try to use the politically correct language. So now I think the term that has been used, maybe not the most official term, is people on the move. Because they are moving, no? People on the move, and sometimes we call it, well, migration is of course a bigger term, but caravan is representing really, because it was a real caravan in terms of people bringing caravan, moving from one place to another place along the way. And at one point, there were more than 10,000 people walking. Many of them are women with children. I haven't seen it personally, to be very honest, because I don't speak Spanish. So my other colleague went there. But it's really touching experience when I look at the video, when I look at the documentary that we make on how these people experience different things. Really, the fact that Lycée Tados provided limited number of days to accommodate these people, it's very important because we cannot accommodate people more than, I think, 3 weeks. And after that, new people will come. So this is really people on the move. We do have a little bit of publication on that online. If just in case if you're interested, you can have a look at it. Yeah.
I think the point Budi made about not abandoning is really important. And just a little picture of that was that in October last year, when a group of us, including Budi and Thomas and some of the Dominicans, were going around and we were visiting various villages and listening to people, focus group discussions and so on. And Budi and I had been trying to do a good job of keeping aware, so that Warwick and others who were trained in leading these groups were doing it. The last village we were in, the men of the village insisted that Budi, Thomas, and I had to join in the discussion. We couldn't bob around on the sidelines, so we sat there. And one of the men in that village said something very challenging. He said, "We get lots of NGOs come through here. They ask questions about logging, they take their notes, they write their reports, they go away and nothing happens. What's different with you?" Remember that, Warwick? And the answer was kind of got thrown to me. And really the answer is that, in fact, we don't have a magic solution. You know, we're not going to come and fix it overnight, but we're the guys who live just up the road. We're the ones who walk up and down that road every day, or we go up and down that road in the bumpy bus when the bus is working. We're the ones who come from those areas. We're the ones with family connections in that village and the other villages we went to as well. We've got a local connection, and that's important that we keep that up. And we're not going to zoom in and have an instant solution, but at least we can stand in solidarity with them and continue to keep that issue alive. And I think that's what it means by not abandoning, that we keep it, we keep the issue alive, we keep it in front, we keep it out there, we keep slowly working away at it as we can. It's like, maybe like water dropping on a stone. It slowly begins to change things. So that's why I think that solidarity is such an important thing.
Thank you. I want to understand the process we have to take to elevate some of these atrocities in our communities to Franciscan International. Because I was working with Michael. Is it Michael or Michelle? Michael, right. Working in Mozambique at that time. And he still couldn't give me how we should elevate some of these things to Franciscan International. So I would please, if we can be given that process. Thank you.
So thank you very much. That's very good questions, because what is very important for us in our work is also the accountability toward the community that we are serving. So I will tell the story of Solomon Island tomorrow, for example, on how what we've done and what we will continue to do on the issue of Solomon Island, because it's not only one shop activity done, no, but it has to be a long way, long-term processes. You spoke with Mikael, and I think Mikael heard you, listened to you, but maybe not reporting back to you on what he's done. This is also something that we are trying to address internally. So we've been really trying very hard within the United Nations to provide attention to the situation in Mozambique, in the sense that we encourage some of the diplomats at the United Nations to speak publicly on the situation in Mozambique. Because, as I said, there is a kind of competitions on what issue is the worst, so that we can speak publicly. What issue that needs more attention, that it can be mentioned publicly. For the case of Mozambique, it is true that there are not too many states who are willing to speak on the situation in Mozambique publicly. It's very unfortunate, but not many. In November, October in fact, we will have one FMM sister from Mozambique who is going to come to Geneva and to speak with some of the diplomats. Because until now, we have not had any person from Mozambique to come to Geneva yet to really facilitate the discussions between the diplomats and the people coming from the region, because it makes different. If I speak on the issue of Mozambique, it will be different than if you speak on the issue of Mozambique, or someone coming from the region speaking on the issue of Mozambique. It provides the first-hand information. So, Sister Lydia, I think, after that, I can be in touch with you and try to provide some of the updates. She is trying to come to Geneva so that she will be able to speak with some of, when we talk about the diplomats, we also have to be very strategic, because we have to speak with those who might have roles. On the issue of Mozambique, we are not going to talk to the diplomat from Indonesia, useless. We are not going to talk to a diplomat of, let's say, Costa Rica. It's useless. We have to find the diplomat that has either political interest or political link with Mozambique. It can be Brazil, Portugal, if it is about natural resources, it can be either Germany, Canada, US. They might not then speak publicly, but we can do, not politically correct, punch on their face, you know. So that's quite important as well, because once we have that sort of meeting, they have to report back to the capital. Any meeting with civil society, with their diplomats in Geneva, they have to report back to the capital, so that the capital will be made aware that there are people coming from the affected communities who came and complained, who came and raised that issue. So this is, although it might not appear in public, but this is one of the efforts that we are doing. So for Mozambique, I'll be in touch with you because it's very timely, so that when the sister comes, the sister can also provide some of the issue, and then we can report back to you, to the people who are affected. The diplomacy is always something that is long term. It's very long term, and the diplomacy is also very windy. Just to tell the last story, some of you know Sri Lanka. I think either the SSF or the SSF and SSF have got strong link with Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka is very passionate because of the civil war. And you understand the civil war was really, really difficult. And I came to Sri Lanka just right after the civil war. The situation is very bad. And then at one point, we could have a government that might be a bit better than the Rajapaksa family. And then that government, unfortunately, was kicked out. And the Rajapaksa came back again. So from the human rights perspective, we succeeded to improve the situation in a certain way, but because of the political situation, it went down back again. So for us, at a certain moment, we felt that the 20 years work that we did was nullified into zero again. With much more complex situation, because in the past it was between Sinhalese government against Tamil, but now it's much more complicated than that, between the political establishment of Rajapaksa with Ranil, the current president, plus the Chinese investment that has an island territory within Sri Lanka, and so on and so forth, with the poverty, with the economic crisis. And then we said, wait a minute, now we felt that we moved forward, and all of a sudden we moved backward 5-6 steps again. We have to have a strong reflection again. What does it mean for us in terms of international advocacy? What does it mean? So what we have to do, and sometimes we have to stop and think again. What can we do together? Like on Monday, we will have a Human Rights Council in which the High Commissioner on Human Rights will report on Sri Lanka. There are some recommendations, and we do feel that deja vu, these recommendations were made 20 years ago. And now we have to go back again to that recommendation because it becomes very complex. And I think it's very important to be very, very patient. And again, when we are with the victims, with the people in Sri Lanka, we will say that we are with you. We are in solidarity. This situation is not easy. Let's digest it together. Let's try to work together. It's not very easy. It's not magic wand that we can solve the problem, but let's try to work together so that your cause, your suffering is not forgotten. And this is with Mozambique because there are very few NGOs who work on the issue of Mozambique. And we are trying to fill in that gap, and we are trying to really give meaning on the situation in Cabo Delgado. Maybe we can have bilateral discussions on certain strategies so that I can go back again to Mikael and try to at least report back to you, exchange information with you, how to move forward.
It might be a good information also, so you know that every communion has an office at UN. Yes. So we have the ACO UN. So we have observers sitting at the United Nations, both in Geneva and in New York. And we now have a person who is living in Geneva. He will meet Switzerland, who falls, so then they can work together on those issues. And taking advantage of the UPR opportunities, which universal periodic reports that it's been every year is done in some for some countries, about some countries. So it's a good opportunity for Franciscus International and the ACO UN working together and sharing resources, personal and influential resources, and also using the Archbishop of Canterbury position to do that as well. Next to ready? So we have 10 minutes before the best part of the day, which is lunch, and just to maybe to point out our way forward. So today we were trying to do the first part of this catechesis from the 2nd century. So how to actually express the good news in times of desperation, or in times of persecution, or in times of death, or in times of maybe there's no light perception. The first thing we did, but I think it's good, and it's all over the Gospels and maybe the Old Testament as well, is to approach. This is the first thing that Jesus did, and in the Gospel of Luke and John, again, same community, so the Asia Minor, this approaching and this I see you is a very recurrent thing. So this is a good way to express the good news. It's actually to recognize, to see, and to understand. And in order to do that, we need to do two things, which Jesus did. So one is move, not expect that people come. So we need to move. We need to go. We need to have being dirty feet. We need to smell dust, and etc. So we need to move. We need to go towards that situation, which is to be present. I think it's a good way that the Lambeth Palace with its reconciliation team is promoted. So be present, be curious, and reimagine. So alongside to being present, which is again is asking the questions, how are you? Is and stay for the end reply, not only as a politeness chatting, chit chats. No, how are you? But also mean it and stay to listen. How are you? And maybe to be annoying and ask again. So how are you? In order to show that you care, you see, you do not abandon. So you will be there. Even if there is silence, so you will be there. And another thing that sometimes we Christians are not good at is to shut up. And we need to shut up in order to listen. And in order to respect the process of listening, we need really to shut up. Because this kind of a working groups is not supposed to only be a participatory technique. It needs to actually come from our heart. So I know and I respect your perception. You have knowledge. So you have things to share. You are someone from whom I learn from. And it's beautiful that Jesus does this often and often and often. So he needs to learn. He wants to learn from the other's perspective. This is why he asks questions, or he accompanies. And he shut up sometimes in order to listen. I say that I'm a professor, so for me to shut up is very difficult. But I do need to shut up. We need to shut up so we can listen. And really listen. So really pay attention. And this, in a fancy words, it is an epistemological challenge for us. So when we ask, who does theology? Or who holds knowledge? What is the difference between a medical doctor and a shaman or a traditional healer? There is in our society not only difference, but also levels of qualification. But actually the difference is a traditional healer has 5,000 years of accumulated knowledge, and the medical doctor has 200, 300 years. But they do know different things. They can complement themselves. It's not about competition. It's not about who has the best way of doing things. So why we don't collaborate in order to qualify. We are very fast to qualify or to dequalify, actually. But the point is, do I believe that the traditional healer has true knowledge and actually can help? So do I believe that, well, I hold a PhD in theology, but do I believe that someone who does not have a PhD in theology does theology? And I think we should believe that. So it's not someone who has a PhD I don't know more than you. I know different things, maybe. You know 1,000 things that I don't know, and I do need to learn. You don't know the man called Paulo Ueti. He is a very famous philosopher who works with education. And of course, he was a doctor, academically speaking, and he works with literacy. And once, of course, this level of subordination, because of our colonizing mind and the structure was always there. And then he made a joke, or he made a game with people, adults, peasants. So let's see who knows more. So you ask me 10 questions, and I will ask you 10 questions, and let's compete. So it ended up, he could answer any of the 10 questions that was posed to him, because it was all about agriculture, moon, seasons, what's the best way to do this or that. And he had no clue. So he lost the bet, actually. And it was to show his students so that we just know different things. I can share you things, you learn from me. And of course, you can share things and I will learn from you. So we are equals. So my role here is a midwife, I'm a facilitator. I'm not an advisor, I'm not an assessor, I'm a facilitator. I just want to facilitate. And we can share, we can collaborate. So this means to be present. And when we are present, things change. But the colonizing mindset must go out, must die, or must be under control. If we can't kill it, it's not good to kill people or things. But the colonizing mind should be under control, which sometimes it's not in some of our work, of our preaching. Let me give you one example. So you do know this famous passage, it was in one of the Sundays, past Sundays, so Matthew 18, 15 onwards. If someone sins against you, what do? You talk to the person privately. And the person doesn't listen to you. So what do? You ask help. Call someone to help you. But this person does not listen to you. So what do? You take this person to the church, to the community. But this person does not listen to the community. So what do? What is the most common interpretation? No, but yeah, this is what is in the text. But what is the actually preaching? So what do we do in this community? What do we do with this person?
It's often rest, exclude them.
It's often the preaching is just like Pilatus, no? I washed my hands. I did everything I could. I am really with clean consciousness. He or she is excluding himself or herself. And let's exclude this person because it's no way. But this is the colonizing, homogenic, so no diversity mind speaking. The text does not say that. The text says, what the text says, brother?
Treating like a tax.
Treat this person like a Gentile and a tax collector. The text does not say exclude him or give up on him or her. And if we go to the whole chapter 18 of Matthew, which is Jesus is speaking to the leadership of the church. Jesus is not speaking to the ordinary audience. The whole chapter is to the leadership of the church, how the leadership of the church should behave. So that means they are not behaving well. This is why they need to be taught. A whole chapter, it's a big chapter. because the leadership of the church is not behaving well. They are actually deviating. This is why the whole chapter was built as a sermon, as a discourse. So if Jesus is saying, treat this person like a tax collector and Gentile, what the question we should be doing? How Jesus treats Gentiles and tax collectors. If we, by baptism, we want to be Jesus, to be like him, to think like him, to feel like him. So how Jesus treats those kind of people? And the answer is absolutely obvious. He treats them better, with more attention, he spends more time with them rather than with the brothers and sisters already converted. But our colonizing mind, our, imperial Roman or imperial mind always will say, exclude. I know this difficult person. I'm sure that you do have this kind of people in our lives. That is labeled, this is a difficult person. And we usually exclude it or try to shut out, put out. So this is how being present, when we look at Jesus, being present means actually to control the colonizing imperial theology and pedagogy, and to be actually like Jesus, to do something that changes, and the relationships, even silent relationships, changes, just to be there silently. Do not abandon. Even sometimes we can't do anything right now, but being there. So it is it's a good way to do the gospel, to spread and to express and to live out the good news. This is the first part of our conversation. So the first part of the text. So tomorrow we will go to another part of the text, which is actually challenging our theology. Again, very much fueled or tainted by imperial theology. Unfortunately, we keep calling God Almighty. This word doesn't even exist in Hebrew. In the Hebrew Bible, God was never, ever called Almighty. This was Antioch IV when he translated the Bible into Greek. And then all the names of God became Pantocratus, which by coincidence was the same title as his. By coincidence. So then God has the same title as the emperor who paid the bill to translate the Bible. Of course. So canon and imperial theology is there. They are there. So then we needed to revisit and reshape our theological thinking and theological working, which is our discourse. And again, discourse is not only a means of communication. Discourse is a means to shape reality. And we've been seeing that about this fake news. Facts sometimes are even not important. The narrative is important. How we sell the fact is important. And this is theology, how we do theology. And another question maybe for us to think from now to tomorrow. So we are Jesus followers. The question is, which Jesus? What is the image of Jesus we have, we worship, and we promote? Because from the Paul's letter, which is in the 50s, throughout until the Revelations, which is maybe about 300, 200, Jesus from a peasant, companion, very simple, very common guy who demanded to be called friend, he became the King of Kings. And in our churches, we even have a feast, very fancy, lots of parishes, the Christ the King, which I'm sorry to say that, this is the only day I do not go to my cathedral. I do not go because this is for me as a biblical scholar and as a person of faith, it's a blasphemy. I can't stand that painting or that theology. I'm sorry, I might be wrong, but I know that God loves me anyway. But this is how it came to. So from a companion who walks, who sees you, who goes towards you, who stays with you and does things with you as an equal, and then he became the one with fancy clothes, throne, scepter, crown, very distant, and also lots of this whole imperial titles. You know that the only title that differs Jesus from the emperor is he is the Son of God. Oh, sorry, he is the Son of Man. Even the Son of God is the emperor's titles. The Savior, emperor's titles. The Messiah, the emperor's titles. Principles, yeah. Prince of Peace, the emperor's titles. The only title that differs Jesus from the emperor is I am the Son of Man, which links Jesus to the prophetic lineage, not David lineage. And again, why we portray Jesus as new David? David was a horrible person. Horrible. Yeah. Maybe he was nice when he was 12. Blonde, you know, singing, dancing, nice guy, maybe. But when he became king, he was horrible. And there is at least 17 books criticizing him very heavily. But because one phrase, which is the Palm Sunday, because one bad phrase, then he became the son of David. This is something for us to think, because it matters. So discourse and image, our imagination matters to our expression of the good news. And again, it's not only ways of communication, it's shaping reality and changing mindsets and actions. So thank you.